atheism as such is on the rise, when in fact it is preached in some areas with an evangelical fervor to rival anything produced by the church. So you may very well find yourself in conversation, in debate, with an atheist or someone who rejects religion in general. And I appreciate how the question has been asked, because right away there is an acknowledgement that an atheist may be a friend. And if there is a debate, there is an acknowledgement that the debate can be friendly, and I think this is very important. Because far more important than what you might say in any such debate is the attitude with which you enter that debate. That matters far more. And how do you speak to that atheist? The temptation, the tendency for Christians over the last 2,000 years or so has been to speak to non-believers with a certain condensation, looking down on them in some way. It probably has something to do with that psalm we read this morning. The one that starts out, "Fools say in their hearts, there is no God." And you might well understand that song to be saying that anyone who refuses to believe in God is automatically a fool. And why would you befriend a fool? Why would you enter into a debate with a fool, with someone who lacks knowledge and understanding and wisdom? And so perhaps that psalm has contributed to a negative attitude towards atheism, but you know what? That's not what the psalm actually says. And that is not what it means. Which should be obvious when you think about it. Because when that psalm was written, some 3,000 or so years ago, atheism, the philosophy of atheism as we know it today, simply did not exist. I mean, the scientific underpinnings that made it possible for people to understand the universe at all, without making some reference to supernatural forces, did not exist. There were no atheists as we know them. And so, there's no way that this psalm could have been targeting what we know, the people we know today as atheists. It's not possible. Who then are the people that this psalm is talking about? Who are the fools? Well, a better understanding, a better translation of the original text would probably be helpful here. Because do you know what it says? It actually says in the original Hebrew. The original text goes like this. Fools say in their hearts, no God. Fools say in their hearts, no God. There is no there is in the text. The translators added those two words in an attempt to make the psalm a little easier to understand, but they're not there. And if those words are taken out, you can understand the opening line of that psalm very differently. Because it could be saying that the fools are the ones who say no God to God. In other words, the true fools are the ones who have some sense of God, but do not behave accordingly, do not listen to what God has to say. The fools are the ones who maybe talk about God all the time, who use God, their ideas about God, as a blunt object to attack people who do not agree with them, but do not behave in a way that honors God. So the fools, according to the psalm, are the believers who do not act according to their beliefs. This psalm is not targeted against atheists as we know them. It is the believers who do not believe and do not act according to their beliefs who are corrupt, whose deeds are abominable. They are targeted by this psalm. And so don't be tempted to write off any atheist as simply a fool. Do not hesitate to befriend one. Do not hesitate to enter into a friendly debate. But if you do enter into that debate, the next question is, what is the goal of that debate? What are you supposed to accomplish by debating? Because perhaps the assumption would be that somehow you, with your debating ability, with your logic and reason, are supposed to convince your atheist friend to change their mind, to accept the existence of God. And you know what? The reality is that's probably not going to happen. Very unlikely. Perhaps there was a time when you could go up to someone and you could lay out some sort of logical or philosophical proof for the existence of God, or you could lay out your evidence for the historical Jesus, and they would take your evidence and they would look at it, and they would say, my, that's very convincing. Perhaps I will throw out my entire way of looking at the world and adopt yours. That may have worked in previous ages. I'm not sure it did. But it certainly doesn't work today. Because you know what will happen if you lay out all of your logical or philosophical or historical, whatever reasons for believing in God before someone? You know what they will do? They will look at that and say, well, I'm very glad that works for you. I'm very glad that's true for you, but I prefer to see things differently. Because you see, we are living in an age where people will not change their way of looking at the world simply based on evidence. It doesn't work that way. Not that kind of evidence. And I'm not just talking in areas of religion and faith either. I mean, just look at all those people. You've heard about them, all those people down in the United States who, despite all of the evidence that is available, still continue to refuse to believe that Barack Obama was born in the United States. They refuse to believe it. Now, that refusal to believe it has nothing to do with the evidence that's available. Nothing at all. It has everything to do with the fact that certain facts simply do not mesh with how they choose to view the world. We're living in an age where that has become the norm. So as you enter into, now I'm not trying to suggest that no one will ever change their mind about God. It's quite possible. And I'm certainly not trying to suggest that there are no reasonable points to be made in a debate. Of course there are. But what I'm saying is that the debate itself is not really going to change some people's mind. It will take something else. And we'll get there in a moment. But there still is a place for debate. And what you do in a debate is very important. And what is the first and most important thing you must do in a debate with an atheist? I would say it is this. You must listen. Listen and open your mind and prepare to learn. And I say this because I have been struck again and again in my discussions, in my conversations with atheists and with people who have rejected religion, how often I agree with them. Oh, I don't agree with their ultimate conclusion that there is therefore no God, but I am with them all the way through the debate. When I listen to an atheist describe to me the God that they do not believe in, you know what? 9 times out of 10, I do not believe in that God either. Nor would I want to. And when I have people who have rejected religion describe to me the religion that they have objected, I usually find very same things in people of faith that I have seen. I am with them all the way. Let me give you a very simple example to show you what I mean. In the year 1961, an amazing thing happened. A man left the gravity of this earth and went up into space for the very first time. 1961. That man's name was Yuri Gagarin. He was a Soviet cosmonaut. And when the Soviet Union announced to the entire world this incredible achievement of sending Yuri Gagarin up into space, they could not help but make a particular point. The Soviet leader, an atheist, the leader of an officially atheist government, gleefully announced to the world that when Yuri Gagarin was up there, he didn't see God. What he was saying, what he was claiming, was that Yuri Gagarin and the Soviet space program had disproved the existence of God. Now, had Yuri Gagarin disproved the existence of God? Had he really? Of course not. But what he had disproved was a particular idea about God. He had disproved this idea, this image of a God who is just up there, above the clouds, above the firmament of the heavens, looking down upon us. An idea of God, an image of God that people had had in their minds for millennia. He pretty much disproved that. And when Yuri Gagarin went up there and didn't see God, did that shake some people's faith in God? Doubtlessly it did. There were probably some people who, on hearing that news, did give up their notions, their ideas about God. But not very many, I suspect. Because I think we all know that that idea of God, the idea of a God who's just up there above the clouds, above the firmament, looking down upon us literally, was never an adequate idea of God. It was a false idea of God. And if Yuri Gagarin destroyed that false idea of God, what he actually accomplished was he did a service for people of faith everywhere by destroying a false image of God and forcing us to come to a better understanding of what God is really like. And I think that is exactly the service that atheists often perform for people of faith. There was a great man. His name was Rabbi Abraham Isaac Kook. He was the first chief rabbi of what later became the modern state of Israel. And he dealt with many atheists in his days. The modern state of Israel was founded by atheists. And Rabbi Kook had a very important, interesting point of view about atheists. He said that an atheist does not reject the true God. What an atheist rejects is one of man's many false images of God. And since any false image of God is, in effect, an idol, atheists are therefore doing a service for people of faith by smashing our false idols. And I think that is exactly what atheists often do for us. Several years ago, there were a number of atheist groups who bought up ad space on the sides of buses in major cities all over the world. Made a bit of a stir at the time. And the first ad that they placed on the sides of those buses was by far the one that got the most attention. You probably heard about it. There is probably no God, the sides of the buses proclaim in large letters. So stop worrying and enjoy your life. Now I know a lot of people of faith were upset by those bus ads, but I've got to admit that I was more puzzled than anything else. Because you see, the God that they were attacking with those ads, it's not the God that I worship. Not the God that I have come to know through Jesus Christ. I mean, those bus ads were directed against a God whose chief job seems to be to make everyone worry that they're going to do something wrong all the time. The God they were rejecting is a God who is out to spoil everyone's day and make everyone miserable. That's the God they were attacking. And I know they did not invent that idea of God. They got that idea of God from believers. There are many Christians who seem to see God in exactly that way. But the bottom line is this. That's a false idea of God. That's not what God is like. That is certainly not the God who was revealed to us in Jesus of Nazareth, who always spoke of a loving Father, who knew how to take good care of his children. So frankly, I've got to say, any atheist who attacks that false idea of God as the cosmic killjoy who's out to spoil everyone's day is doing a service to believers anyway. That's why I've always been pleased. I've always enjoyed my conversations with atheists. I feel they have this way of putting their finger on my false ideas, my false idols, my false images of God, my erroneous approach to faith. And I always do well to listen to them. The atheists are sent among us to smash our idols. And you know what? If we could dispense with all of our false ideas about God, if we could dispense with all our erroneous approaches to faith, perhaps the need for atheists would disappear, or largely disappear. But we have many idols in need of smashing, and so I think they will continue to be among us. What in the end will actually persuade an atheist, or at least a few atheists here or there, to change their mind about God? It can happen, but I don't think it's going to happen in your debate. I don't think it will happen as a result of your reasoned arguments. You see, what an atheist usually needs is a better image, a better idea of God than the one that they have already rejected, probably for very good reason. And how can you show that better image of God? Not with your arguments, with your life. For if you can show them in how you live, in the joy that infects your life, in the acts of goodness and kindness and gentleness that reflect the very heart of God, if you can show them that God can be conceived in another way from the God that they have rejected, perhaps they might be willing to change their mind. It has to do with how you let God show through you. But in the meantime, let me simply say this. Thank God for the atheists. I mean, I hope they don't find that offensive if I say that, but thank God for the atheists. Where would we be without them? We need them to destroy our false images of God. Anyone who's willing to enter into that discussion with us in a meaningful way, even as an adversary, is a blessing sent among us. Will you take a few moments in silence?